What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the Around the Crease podcast. This is episode 71. This is Mike Loveday, and I'm back with my co-host, Michael Ward, and we're going to talk a little bit about the high school lacrosse season, where we've been for the last few weeks, and we're going to dig deep into the Premier Lacrosse League and what's been going on and some of the hot topics over the first 3 weeks of that season. And we're starting now. All right, welcome back to episode 71 of the Around the Crease podcast. And yes, Michael Ward and I are back after a little bit of a hiatus. It's kind of surprising. It's been a couple weeks, but it's gone by fast because, I've been busy, you've been busy. It's kind of the end of season, but also the start of the recruiting season that just kind of kept us busy and not able to really sit down and record. So it's good to be back.
It is good to be back. It's great. It's great to be home in my case.
Yeah, I'm sure.
I slept in my bed for the first time last night, and I think 14 days. So it's good to be back.
Yeah, and that's kind of what we're going to touch on today, because obviously we have the start of basically the recruiting season. I mean, I think that's what everybody kind of refers to it as. So we have the recruiting season that's cranking up now. You've been to a few events. I've been to an event. And then at the end of the show, I want to talk about just the Premier Lacrosse League and the PLL and kind of get our thoughts on that. I know it's a little bit out of our usual range, but it's lacrosse and there's not a whole lot of other stuff going on. So it's the topic of conversation. And I have some thoughts. So that usually helps. But to kick it off, Michael, why don't you kind of let us know, I don't even know every place that you've been over the last few weeks. So what have you been up to for the last few weeks?
Okay. I'm trying. I have to go back and remember it because when I was through it yesterday, I was trying to all the states I was in, just stopping and starting. So I think from the very beginning of being on the road was the Ohio Championships, the high school championships for Ohio, which were at Ohio Wesleyan University. And I always try to get a little something extra out of everything. So, try to kill two birds with one stone.
Yeah.
So the convenience of that was at Ohio Wesleyan was I got to watch the D2 championship, the D1 championship, and then the following Sunday there was the D3, the Midwest D3 showcase.
Yeah.
So I signed my son up for that. So conveniently for me that we slept overnight, he got to perform in that the next day. He got to watch the high school games with me. He got to help me, keep track of all the stats and, which was a nice eye opener for him to watch the game again, which I've said, if your kids haven't watched a high school game of kids, their contemporaries, take them to it.
Yeah.
Because it was an eye opener for him, and it was and it motivated him. It really motivated him.
Yeah.
Especially when there were kids who I said, well, this player's going here, this player's going here, and he's like, really? Okay. And it's sort of like I could do what they're doing.
Yeah.
From a father standpoint, I enjoyed that. From a reporter standpoint, journalist standpoint, the high school games were great.
Yeah.
I mean, I love going to the high school game. I love it.
Yeah.
I was covering them for Inside Lacrosse. I mean, if I'm, going to be honest, which I appreciated because, let's just say in 1 year we got Inside Lacrosse to cover Midwest High School Championships.
Yeah.
Because then I also covered the Michigan Championships. I did the Loyola New Trier sectional championship for them. And then I did a lot of player evaluations for them. They gave me a whole list of players that they've heard about, some top level players, and then asked me to do evaluations for them, which I really liked. I don't know if they were prepared for my level of getting it, because I've seen some evaluations before, and it's just like, it's almost like talking points.
Yeah.
Where I went in depth because I know how serious these are, especially the kids in the Midwest. When you get to see your name in print or online, I feel it was worth to do as much work as possible. So I reached out to coaches, I reached out to players, I reached out to opponents just to get what's their opinion. And all it was a little blurb.
Right.
So I don't, when I took it very seriously because I would hope if it was someone doing something like that for my son,
Yeah.
that they would actually take the time to do the work. So I really enjoyed that. So that was one thing that came across. And then so from there, just came home, did that. I'm trying to think what happened.
I know recently.
And then the following week,
go ahead.
Yeah, the following week I went to Michigan for the Michigan State Championships. Did the same thing, covering them for us and Inside Lacrosse, and again, which I appreciated, that they're covering the Midwest.
Yeah.
Anything that covers the Midwest, me, that's what I care about. My son's travel team is from Detroit, so 2 days later he had his practice, so we just stayed.
Yeah.
So then I was in Detroit, and then from Detroit, his practice, 2 days. I decided I have a young son. Let's go look at some colleges. So we drove from Detroit to Cleveland, straight down Ohio. So we visited Baldwin Wallace University, College of Worcester, Kenyon, and Denison, which were all, again, some people might have never heard of all these schools. One of these schools, every one of them had like something that was just like, wow, like where I was like, wow.
Yeah.
So that's made it so that now I'm, we're on a few days. It's just me and the son. Then we went to New Jersey. I keep forgetting. So he was at a IMCLA tournament in New Jersey, which is the Coaches Association. We had a few days there, and then went to Bel Air, Maryland for the Inside Lacrosse Session 1 lacrosse tournament, and spent a few days there, and then just got home yesterday. So that was a ride. I saw a lot of lacrosse, saw a lot of kids. I had to have watched 1,000 kids.
Yeah.
I mean, I just, when my son wasn't playing, I was walking around watching teams. Now here's how I figured it out. I followed wherever I saw the most college coaches go.
Yeah.
Because, well, I guess a secret, or I always knew this, but college coaches usually are given names of players to watch.
Yeah.
They know who to watch. So at one point I was watching, I probably shouldn't say this about I was watching my son's game.
Yeah.
And the editor of Inside Lacrosse was behind me watching the game behind me.
Yeah.
So immediately I turned around. I said, there must be someone important here. And over there from Detroit.
Yeah.
From Denver. And I'm like, okay, there must be someone real good over here. So I walked away from watching my son's game and then watched that game to try to figure out who the player was. So it was almost like a test for me. Like,
right.
Can I pick out the players?
Yeah.
So I was pretty darn good. I have to say, I would walk up and say here's a coach from Holy Cross. Here was a coach from Denver. I didn't talk to Bill Tierney. I wanted to, but he sort of disappeared. But I just said, who are you interested in? And then they gave me a crazy look.
Yeah.
Like, who the hell are you? Just sort of popping up out of nowhere. And of course, I would say, I'm from laxrecords.com.
Yeah.
I don't know if they knew it.
Yeah.
I don't know if but I know this. I let them know that there was something and like, here, we're doing this together.
Yeah.
And so they were all sharing, and it became funny because I was in the conversation with like 4 coaches.
Yeah.
Like, I agree with this, and I like this, and like that. Then I just sort of walked away and chuckled, and like, that was fun.
Yeah.
So that was my experience for the last few weeks, plus seeing some great high school championship games.
So what did you think of the
How
Inside
about you?
Lacrosse?
I know you were gone.
Well, yeah. Before we get there, like, what was your opinion of the Inside Lacrosse Invitational? Because I've never been to it.
Okay, so I've been to 4 Inside Lacrosse invitationals over the last 3 years. Some in the fall, some in the summer. They've gotten better every year.
That's what you'd expect.
This year, so there's 2. Well, yeah. Well, so it's in the same
better
location.
than the other
so
way around.
The location, right. I would say they doubled the amount of teams this year than last year. I don't know if that's good or bad, because I always used to tell people, and I'm not shilling for anybody here.
Mm-hmm.
Everything I say, I'll badmouth something if it warrants it, but I'll also praise it.
Right.
I've always told people the Inside Lacrosse Session 1 session that I was at, where my son was participating with a team, I would say is not the A-level teams.
Okay.
I'll say it's the B-level teams,
Okay.
which is still good lacrosse. It's not. So the team my son is on, there's a red team and a white team.
Okay.
Let's say the red team is a D1 level and the white team is a D3 level. Not a problem with that. Just the reality, and I prefer reality than saying, "Hey, everyone can make D1," because you can't.
Right.
So Inside Lacrosse has 2 sessions. Session 1, I would say, is geared towards that. Session 2, which is in another couple weeks at the same location, is the upper echelon.
Okay.
They put on a very good tournament.
Okay.
Well run. ESPN3 did their championship games at Johns Hopkins.
Yeah, I saw that.
I mean, we didn't get to the championship game, so that didn't happen. But
right.
But I mean, that's pretty cool.
It's a good carrot to dangle.
You're right, and so they're learning. They're learning from other things and getting feedback, and they're not afraid to ask. I spent a lot of time with Tommy Lyons, who works for them, who's in charge of it,
mm-hmm.
and what do you think of this? What do you think needs to be done here? What do you think needs to be done here? And I said, I like it. I used to tell people you could maybe have 8 teams in your division. So
mm-hmm.
although 21s had probably 16, the amount of college coaches to teams is fantastic.
Yeah.
It's because you're in a smaller location, but you have 60 college coaches.
Yeah.
And they're all right there. And there's, 8 games going on for one age group. There's 4 games for another. So they're all there. You're sitting there next to coaches the whole time.
Yeah.
So as I said, the bang for your buck was good, I guess. I don't know what I don't know what the buck cost.
Right.
But as far as teams going and wanting to actually see these coaches.
Yeah.
I've been to other tournaments where they're like, "Oh, we've got 60 college coaches," and I haven't seen one.
Yeah.
Which happens a lot.
Yeah.
You see these guys standing right, some of these guys. You're like, wow. I mean, seeing Bill Tierney go walking by.
Yeah.
I doubled.
Yeah.
Is he standing here?
You used to see him on TV.
Right. So that was good, and I was happy about that. Did you lose me here? Something just in there. The IMCLA one in New Jersey wasn't as good.
Okay.
I mean, here you're going to play lacrosse for the kids. It's fine. I don't. Whatever. If they're I kept saying to my son the whole time, "Are you having fun?" And he's like, "Yeah." I'm like, "Okay, that."
Right.
I'm not expecting some coach to come walking up to my son after playing a game of lacrosse and be like, "We want you, son."
Right.
Like I think a lot of people think is going to happen.
Yeah.
It's not going to happen.
Right.
So they might write your name down. There's a whole
Especially
database
depending on what age group you're in. They may not be able to come talk to you anyway.
Right. Well, there was a lot of D3 coaches, and the D3 coaches could come and talk to you, and then there were uncommitted 20s, so they could be talked to.
Yeah.
But they also will talk to the coach and say, "Tell me about this kid." So I saw kids who I said, "That's a D1 player.
Yeah.
That's a D1 player. That's a D1 player." And then I saw other kids who aren't,
right,
or not yet.
Yeah.
You get at this age right now where my son is the 16 years old, pretty much, going into the junior year. So you have kids, let's say for my son, who is 5'5", 125 pounds,
mm-hmm.
and he was being covered at one point by a kid who is 6'3", 190, and it's a man amongst boys, and
right.
And they're playing, and they're all playing to show off a little, to
right.
get recruited.
They're hoping to get press.
So when my son gets the ball behind the cage, they're not playing off.
Yeah.
They're attacking him.
Right.
He can't outrun him.
Right.
He can't. So, I just said, just play your game. That's the reality of it. Again, I don't know how many people have the reality check of when they're at this. I think a lot of parents think, "Oh, my kid's a Division I player." Funny enough, I was recognized by people from the East Coast, which always gets weird. Now, I will say this. One day I was wearing my Lax Records thing, so they noticed the logo. It's a very... If you're on the internet, you know the logo. So they say, "Oh." And then they would say, "Can you come? This is my kid over there." And they're like, "Yeah, he's looking at Villanova." I don't want to say that. They're looking at Villanova, Lehigh, Bucknell. And I'm like, "Which one?" And they're like, "That one." I'm like, "Oh." I'm like, "Those are great, great schools. Good luck. I hope it works out." And then I sort of walk away being like, I don't know if the kid's fully grown. I don't know that, but I'm looking at it saying,
you see him for 10, 15 minutes. It's not like, it's a hard, I mean, it's.
But you could tell a skilled player.
Yes.
When you see that hand go offhand and they can't make the pass, it's awkward.
Yeah.
And if I saw that, who's by no means an expert.
Yeah.
And a college coach, I'm like, that. No.
Yeah.
So I'm sad. I don't know if I'm sort of saddened, and I had this conversation with the Inside Lacrosse staff. There has to be at some point a reality check for parents, maybe. I don't know who does. I mean, because there are kids who are great, and when you see them, they stick out. I mean, they stick. Like, you've seen it.
They rise.
Right. We watched some of the best teams over the season. Yeah. I mean, like St. Anthony's. I mean, you just look at that whole team and you start I giggle. I'm like, this is unbelievable to watch. Like, how lucky are these people to see this? Like,
yes.
Like, I mean, the best play. I saw Culver play 10 times.
Yeah.
Every kid's going D1.
Yeah.
And I'm like, okay, this is the difference. Watching Brother Rice play.
Yeah.
And then you see some of the other. So I struggle a little bit where, like, people were asking me, like, "Oh, does your son want to play college?" I said, "Of course he wants to play college."
Right.
They're like, "Is he going to play college?" I go, "Sort of not up to him."
Yeah.
Sort of up to his skill, how much work he wants to put in. Now, I truly do believe if a kid puts in the work, busts his ass, works, stick skills are a great equalizer, and those things you could work on, there is a spot for you somewhere in a college.
Yeah.
There are enough colleges, there are enough programs that you could look at it.
And we have talked, like, it's it may not be Duke, but it could be Clemson, which is an ACC school, but it may be an MCLA, which is a perfect, like, I shudder whenever I hear people say, "Oh," like, or something, give that reaction. I'm like, you know what? I was like, it's education first. I think a lot of people lose perspective of that. Like,
right. So that was the trip we took coming from Ohio. I said, this is your target. This is your wheelhouse right now. As of right now, this is what your target is. This is you're looking at, hopefully, Baldwin Wallace, Worcester, those. Here's the schools. Let's check them out. We talked with the coach at Baldwin Wallace, the assistant coach. What a facility! Like, I mean, crazy.
Yeah.
Just like my son, who like the typical teenagers, engaged and like, I want to watch my phone and don't want to listen to dad, was like, this is great. And I'm like, my job is done. Like I said, like, he finally got it.
Yeah.
He's been watching high school lacrosse. He saw kids who were going D3. Yeah. Then he got to see some of these D3 schools. And then he's like, I can't wait to get home to work out. He worked out. He played wall ball today for 2.5 hours in my basement.
Yeah.
We got home yesterday from 2 weeks on the road. He got up this morning, I made a workout mix for him that's all 80s, like heavy metal music.
Yeah.
And he played it down, it's Motley Crue and Ozzy Osbourne, AC/DC. And he's like, "Can you put the music on for me?" I'm like, "Yeah." And then 2.5 hours later, he comes up sweaty with a hairband on. Yeah. Like Danielson, just doing wall ball. And I'm like, this has never happened.
Yeah.
And then signed up for the ACT. So
There you go.
so whatever my trip was worked for me.
Yeah.
I wish it was like the magic potion for
Yeah.
everyone, but he seemed to have got it in this 2 weeks.
Yeah.
He saw Justin Glod score a game-winning goal with a second left in the Michigan State Championship,
Yeah.
and it was amazing. And he's just like, "Oh my god!"
Yeah.
And then and then the adulation, and he said, "I wish I could beat like, I wish that would be, I could do that. Like,
Yeah.
I wish." And I said, "Work your butt off.
Yeah.
Work your butt off."
Yeah.
There you go. So that was my 2 weeks. These are the things that have happened that, as I'm recalling it makes me happy that the end result was my kid 2.5 hours today doing that.
Well, it sounds like you got to spend a few weeks.
That made
with
it worth it.
Yeah, and you got to spend a couple weeks with your son on the road, which is,
right.
The time itself is worth it.
Like I said to people, one of my first articles, if I spent $50,000 and I got to help raise my child hands on,
Yeah.
till he went away to college and just been like there for him,
Yeah.
I think that's worth it, because I don't think a lot of people get that opportunity, and I know that I'm lucky and I'm blessed to have that opportunity.
Yeah.
So,
And
this is good.
Yeah, I'd be willing to wager that somewhere down, 15, 20, 30 years from now, you guys will be sitting down and he'll be like, "Dad, you remember that trip we took in the summer of 2019 when we saw the championship games?" Like, he'll remember that trip. It'll be.
I know he will, because there were certain things where I've looked at him and I said, "You'll never forget what you just saw in a million years."
Yeah.
Like, because you see crazy things on the road,
Right? Yeah.
I go, "You'll never forget what we just saw there." I mean, we've seen some goofy things and stuff like that. So that makes it all worth it to me. Again, don't want to sound sappy, but it does. It's what makes it worth it to me.
It's worth it. It's the human moments are what makes it memorable.
And that's everything that's important about this.
Yeah.
I like seeing young men, young women excel, work hard, because it gives me hope for the it gives me hope for the future.
Yeah.
It really does. Like, to see people being aggressive and challenging themselves, as opposed to what you see on TV and what's blasted at you on social media.
Right.
To actually see it's not all true. Not all these kids are sort of slackers and do it. There are kids, you see these kids working and you're going, they're going to be fine.
Yeah.
We're going to be fine. Again, it's a whole macro look and it's crazy, but it's, I don't even know what the word is. It's reassuring, I guess.
Yeah.
It's reassuring to me.
Yeah.
So that wraps up my business.
I can't say that my trip was quite, that level of memorable, but I had a fantastic time. So I guess if you're listening to this on the Sunday we release it, it was about a week ago then, like on the Sunday, I guess it was what would that be, the 15th or whatever, I left for Minnesota because I had the opportunity to check out the ID Lacrosse Showcase. Now, this is an event, like, I had heard of it. It's in its fourth year. I'd heard of it before, but it wasn't anything I'd ever seen. I had just gotten contacted by Bob D'Ignazio, who was the director of the event, late last year, like I want to say like November or December. And so we started talking. So I agreed to come up and cover it and take some photos for him and stuff like that. And I got to say, like, I walked away very impressed. Now, I've attended a lot of lacrosse events in the 10 or 13 years I've been covering lacrosse, but I also used to work for a company that ran a lacrosse event. So the Warrior 40 was an event that my company, when I was with ESPN, like, we ran. So I've been on both sides of an event. So, like, I'm always one of those people, like, I look for markers. I look for things to see, like, is it a well-run event? Because for one of those things, like, if I'm covering it, like, I have to make the decision, like, is this something I would cover again? Like, is this something I see, or is this something that looks like it was thrown together, haphazardly? And I was amazed because it turns out this event is basically run and organized by one guy, just by Bob. And it was fluid. We had a team of people that used to run this stuff. I mean, you're talking about, like, and there's so many things that can go wrong in an event like that. And I just walked away really impressed because, like, I remember I got there on Monday morning, and Bob was the only one there, and he was kind of setting up and getting everything ready for the kids to get their uniforms, which, like, they had color-coded socks based on what graduation year, so a college coach is sitting on the sideline could just look at their socks and be like, oh, that's a 2022, it's a 2023, which I thought was pretty ingenious and very quick way to do it. But he just had everything set up, and then, like, I was talking, I was like, oh, your helpers comment? He was like, oh, sometimes some of the college coaches pitch in. He's like, but I usually do all this myself. And I was like, oh, like, okay. I was like, well, and I can't just stand there. So I asked him if he needed a hand. So I helped put up the banner and some of that stuff that I ended up taking the pictures because I took the kids' headshots. Um, so, like, just from that aspect, if you're just talking the organization aspect, like, that was impressive to me because it's usually not something. I mean, there was 80 kids, and I think there was probably all told over the course of the 2 days, 20 or 30 college coaches attended. Some college coaches attended because there was college coaches coached the teams and the players. So like they had a practice session Monday morning and Tuesday morning, but and those were all run by the same college coaches. So we had coaches from Marquette, St. John's, Princeton, Canisius. Trying to think, I don't want to leave anybody out, but there was Manhattan, and there was a few more, and I'm just kind of losing it in the logos. But so there was that, but then there was also a bunch of college coaches that were just literally there to watch. They showed up for the games, they sat along the sidelines, and it was like he had some college coaches helping, but still ran it himself. From the organization standpoint alone, like that walked away, kind of make it was like, all right, I made the good choice by coming here. And it was funny, like I joked with Bob, and granted, first time I'd ever met him in person, and I don't know if I'm going to be able to bleep this out, but hopefully people don't get offended too well. And I was like, oh yeah, it's like everybody here is really like the first thing everybody says whenever I'm here, like after getting content, they're like, oh yeah, Bob's a great guy. And he kind of joked, and he's like, what would you expect? I was like, well, if everybody's first words out of their mouth is Bob's really a dick, like I would have to hesitate on like, why to hear. I was like, but literally I was like, without even asking, like I just, mention your name, and the first response is like, oh, Bob's such a great guy. Like I was like, that tells me a lot. Like that's the first thing, like unprompted, people just feel the need to share that. But then obviously I was there for the lacrosse and the players, and you got to realize like Minnesota literally just finished playing their season. Like they finished, like the state championship game was played on Saturday. I left on Sunday, and some of those kids that were on the state championship team were there on Monday. So it was for some of those kids, like they were a week or less departed from their season. So that was obviously led to pretty sharp lacrosse. And obviously it wasn't all Minnesota kids. I think on the players that I'll have in my write-up, because I do a players who impress from the event, and that'll be out on Sunday, depending on when you're listening to this. It may already be out. But there was kids from Wisconsin. There was a kid from Illinois. But most of them were Minnesota. But there was a few kids from just the general Midwest as well. And they were sharp. Like, it was impressive. Like, I've always been impressed with the Minnesota kids. I think I sent a tweet out that says, like, this is not a news flash, but there's some real talented kids and some big kids out there. Like, it's not, but, and it was an intimate showcase. Like, there was 80 kids, and it was 2 fields ran, and so like the coaches were in the middle. So literally coaches would flip back and forth. Like there was one coach, it was the Marion coach. Like he would literally he would watch one of the play, and when they took a timeout or when players were at the other end, he would turn and watch the other field. So like plenty of exposure for the kids, and kind of like you said, the cream of the crop tends to rise. Like there's a kid, like I was standing next to one of the coaches, and I never will identify a coach who says whatever, because it's not their. It's up to them to say this, but I was standing next to a coach, and I said something. I was like, did you get that kid's number? And it was I believe it was number 17. He was like, that kid's the man. Like immediately. And like I'd been seeing this kid like over and over, and like as you know, like when you start recognizing the same kid over and over, like because of something they're doing, like there's something there.
That's
like,
it, right?
It's just like you can't help but like your eyes gravitate towards them. Like they're doing stuff right, and you just notice them over and over again. That's usually the key. But they want to have that kind of like vindication from a college coach, especially something so animated. I'm like, all right, like it's like it feels good to be right, like kind of thing. Like, and I make my notes, but then I always refer to college coaches, and I'm always like, it's always vindicating for me to be like,
that's
all right, I have, I have a lot of the same guys. Like it's usually never a 1-to-1 down the list. Like they usually have someone, but it also depends on what they're looking for. You realize, coaches are looking like, oh, we have these spots. So they may not be really looking at defensemen because they may have some of those spots filled or something like that. But yeah, the lacrosse itself was phenomenal. Like it was very impressive. We had decent weather, which I am not accustomed to at this point in time in the season. Like the weather's it's just used to bad weather at this point. But the rain held off on Monday, and Tuesday was gorgeous. But I gotta say, like the one part of the event that I walked away with is they had a Q&A Like they allowed parents and players came in after all the field stuff was done, after the games were played. They had the coaches from Manhattan, St. John's, Princeton, and Detroit Mercy. They were the coaches who were coaching some of the coaches that were coaching the teams. They had them on a panel, and they had all the parents and coaches basically in the little auditorium, and it was a Q&A. Just straight, like parents could ask anything they wanted, players could ask anything they wanted, and of the Division I coaches, and it was an hour long, and I recorded it, so it's going to be a podcast of its own at some point because I was able to kind of set my phone up in the audio in sections depending on how far some of the people were. You may or may not hear them, but there was moments that I forgot that I was there taking pictures because I became so enraptured in what the college coaches were saying. And keep in mind, like, I'm not trying to get a scholarship or play Division I lacrosse. It was just the coaches, like, when they were explaining stuff, I'm like, this is such great information. I was like, these guys could, and I gotta say, Coach Miller from St. John's, like, he really needs to go on the road because he was phenomenal. Like, he was just so great. Like, he has probably because it was at the end, and like I was telling Bob afterwards, I was like, it's always funny whenever you actually turn the mic on, like, because Bob had his list of preset questions just to prompt everything, and then so that was probably the first 20-25 minutes, and he opened up the crowd, and I was happy to see some kids ask questions. But then there was a point where it was just nothing, and I'm thinking in the back of my head, I'm like, no one has asked about scholarships at all. Like, and now I was surprised, and I was like, well, maybe people, they think it got covered enough, and basically what other coaches. And then Coach Miller, he was like, no one wonders how you're going to pay for all this stuff. Like, he just flat out, I found out later, Bob told me, he was like, he does it every year. We just wait for it. He was like, usually someone asks, but this year, like, everybody was just shy. I don't know if everybody was tired. It was probably the greatest 15 minutes that I have ever heard someone talk. Like, I was just praying. Like, I remember as he was talking about the scholarships, and he was breaking it down as far as, like, how it hits a college recruiting budget, like how it hits their scholarships. Like, you have to have this grade point average and the money doesn't count, or if it hits this grade point average, it does count, and then, you know, we can use this money and this money and this money. And he was like, and the one thing he was always telling, like, he kept repeating was, be careful what you hear on a sideline of a lacrosse game about someone getting a full ride. He was like, because it might be academic money, scholarship money. He was like, and there was another pool of money. He's like, there's 3 pools of money that they can pull from. And he just broke it down on, like, how it all works, and basically, like, lifted the veil. And I did forget I was there to take pictures, because I remember at one point I sat down, I'm just kind of watching them. I'm like, oh crap, I'm supposed to take a picture. It's just like one of those moments. So that is going to be, I'm probably going to make that its own clip at some point, because it's worth just, and I even I walked up to him afterwards and I asked him if he'll come on the podcast at one time, and he said yeah. He was like, it was funny because he told everybody, he's like, I get 350 emails. He's like, I just checked in the hour I was sitting here, I got 350 emails. And he told me, he's like, as much as I said that I don't check my emails, he's like, email me. I was like, all right. I was like, I'll probably give you a phone call too, just to confirm, since I know how busy these guys are. We'll wait till the recruiting season's over. But yeah, that was one of the moments that just kind of really stood out, that they had that kind of level of education part, so the kids and the parents can hear, and the coaches there was no BS. They were real. They were like, hey, this is how it is. People ask, like, how do you get noticed? How do you see? And they're like, and a lot of it came down to, like, they want the kids to reach out. They don't want to hear from Michael Ward Sr. that Michael Ward Jr. really is interested in Detroit Mercy. They want to hear from Junior and him, and they're like, don't send it from your parents' email. Don't send it from, like, don't have a recruiting service. Some of the coaches seem to be a little bit more, but it was also like, make it a personalized email. They're like, if you send to Coach Tierney an email that says, hey, Coach Miller, I'm really interested in St. John's. And they're like, that happens a lot.
Oh, it's just that every coach talks about it.
And they're like, you make sure, because if you're in and one of the coaches said, like, if I get that email, I'll forward it on. And Coach Miller, he's like, it goes into my trash. He's like, if you send me an email saying for the Detroit Mercy, he's like, it goes straight to the trash. He's like, because if you can't take the time to know where you're sending the email or who you're sending it to, he was like, it's just flat out. And I'm like, right. Well, that's what I would expect. Like, if I send a potential employer, like, because I always think of it from that end. It's like, if I'm looking for a job and I send, I'm going to lose. If I send Inside Lacrosse Bay, like, hey, I'd really love to work for U.S. Lacrosse, like, they're not going to send it over. They're not going to forward it their way. They're like, all right, that's going in the mail, in the trash. So it was just a really fantastic part. And if that wasn't enough, there was a one-on-one session after that with like all the D3 and the NAIA schools that were there. So like all the coaches from there, like they had them all lined up in the back of the room. And anybody who's curious, like kind of what it actually looks like, if you're wondering how many people there, like I have pictures. If you go to facebook.com/laxrecords, I have a photo album from the 500 photos that I kept. That's not how many I took, that I kept from the event. So you can see the coaches that were there and the turnout and everything. But it was nice to see because they gave enough love to all the different levels of coaches, and people were up there talking with D3 coaches and just asking them questions about their program, what they offer, and stuff like that. And it was great to see the people just taking advantage of it and kind of getting that moment because, you know, one of the questions I got something from a kid on Instagram the other day asking, like, how do you even get recruited from the Midwest? And that's obviously, like, a huge question for people that you ask, but it's also one of those things I realized, like, the kids don't necessarily have access to the coaches like that we do. So I somewhat feel beholden because I have this level of access to, like, kind of try and get those answers for kids.
Right.
And a lot of it just comes down, like, a lot of it comes down to the stuff that you hear in the future podcasts, and I'm going to do some other things with, because I don't want to keep that information nowhere near to myself, but it's just, like, the college coaches were really, like, the personal attention, and they were, like you said, it really seemed like if you send it, like, you email the coach, you show the interest in the program, you give them your highlight, and then you tell them where you're going to be, that is also how you'll know, like, who the college coach is, because they may be on the sideline, but like, hey, we got an email from a kid to say he was at the ID Showcase or the Inside Lacrosse day or session 1 showcase, so they may be trying to check out the kids that are emailing, because the one thing that I really took away, of the many things, one of the things I took away was college coaches really want the kid to be interested in their program first and foremost.
Well, it's because they can't afford the time.
Yeah, and I mean,
they don't have a budget. They can't go see 20.
Yeah, and when you hear how
someone's interested, and they know.
Yeah, and then when you hear about how the financial end works, you start to kind of put the pieces together. I'm like, they can't afford a miss in any way. Like, obviously, you know, recruiting is a crapshoot for the most part. Like, you're projecting how a kid could be in 2 or 3 years when you see him as a sophomore, junior, senior in high school. But it's also like they can't afford a miss in a kid to get there and be like, oh, you know, Manhattan really wasn't what. Like, I didn't realize it was in the city. Like, I didn't realize, like, you can't afford to get a kid to get there and be like, oh, you know, just not like the school because of the location.
Cold.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah, whatever. It's like, oh, you know, I didn't know Manhattan. I didn't know New York was this cold. Like, I really would have rather gone to somewhere, you know, further south. Like, so it was just really interesting to hear everything. I mean, a lot of it wasn't stuff that I didn't already know, but again, it's one of those things, like, when you hear it and you almost hear it repeatedly from every coach is echoing it. It was interesting. So look for that, or at least sections of that podcast coming up as well, because like I said, I told Bob, I was like, this really just needs to be video recorded and, you know, broadcast, or these coaches just need to take this show on the road. And I'm sure they do. I'm sure they give this to every recruit that they're looking at. Like, they break this stuff down for them. But then again, that's a one-on-one, and for a room full of people to hear it, you just get the message out a little bit quicker. And you could tell the parents really appreciated it. I saw a lot of head nodding. I saw a lot of, like, wide eyes when they were talking, especially about the financial stuff.
Right, that's the one.
Yeah, to hear that, I mean, it was just like that. That was eye opening. So yeah, it was a fantastic event on many levels. So, like, I really appreciate it. And then, kind of as a bonus, Rob Graff, the director of Team Minnesota, reached out to me while I was there on Monday and invited me down because they just happened to be practicing. Team Minnesota was practicing a little bit further south on Monday, so I got to go down and check out Team Minnesota. They had their 20s, 21s, and 22s all practicing at a little middle school down in Bloomington. So I got to drive down and check them out. And it was funny because a couple of the kids that were on the 20s and 21s were at the ID Showcase earlier in the day. So they didn't stay for the coaches thing because they had to get ready for another practice. After practicing and playing in games all morning, they had to go practice with Team Minnesota because Team Minnesota's heading to
they were out there.
Long Island to the FLG Big Ten event this weekend. He was like, that's our first event. And he was like, this is really their first real practice because of the season ending, the way the state association does. Like, they can only practice as a team when the season's over. So they didn't have a full team until Monday. So that was really the first day's practice, and that was a treat as well, just to kind of go down, because I've emailed with Rob and I've talked with Rob over the years, but it was first time as many people you meet face to face, because it was my first time in Minnesota. So that was a lot of fun too. So it kind of just added that little extra cherry on top of the trip to kind of get to see some of those kids and some of the the future D1 players that'll be coming out of those programs in that state in the next couple years, considering I was looking at some of the 22s and 23s as well. So it was a good trip, a lot of fun. I did find out, as I posted on Twitter, what the Juicy Lucy was. I had never heard of it before.
Oh, yeah.
And then the guy that I was rooming with, he was the coach at I'm gonna lose it. It was not Duluth, but it starts with a D, and I'm forgetting what it is. But he had mentioned it Sunday night when I got there, and then I heard a bunch of the college coaches talking about it. And for anybody who doesn't know, apparently there's 2 bars in Minnesota that serve the Juicy Lucy, and they both argue over which one is the originator.
Right.
And it's 2 hamburgers with the cheese in the middle instead of on the outside of it, and it was really good. It was really good.
So I've had it. You think, what's so difficult about this? And you're like, it's just really good. I mean, I've done it. I've done it at home.
Yeah.
It's not as good. It's just not like, I don't know what kind of, if there's a special cheese or
maybe
whatever, but it's, as I described it to somebody, I said, think of it as a chicken calf, and instead of butter coming out, it's cheese. You know, like it just comes out, and it's very good. I mean,
and I opted for
that's their thing. That's great.
That's why I get it, because like I told my wife, like she said something, and I was like, well, I got to find some place. Like I can't just eat at Ruby Tuesdays or something like that. I was like, I got to find something. I was like, every state or every city usually has something that's unique to them. Like it may have expanded beyond their borders at some point, but there's usually something that a restaurant or something that all the locals go to, that it's not just the big chain. So that was it. I went to 5-8 because it seemed like I had better parking because it wasn't in the city in downtown, and I was like, being from Chicago, I'm kind of used to circling the block way too many times that I wanted to get to the Team Minnesota practice. So it was good. I had the Roadhouse burger, had a
giant onion ring
and a couple slices of bacon. I was like, I got halfway through it. I was like, I can't finish this. I was like, I didn't come all the way here to not finish this. I was like, I'm just going to be a little uncomfortable for a little bit. I was like, going to make sure I walk around enough after I finish this to not feel quite so guilty. So that's my advocacy for, if you're in Minnesota, you got to try it. There's no real good segue to next, but I do want to talk before we head off about the Premier Lacrosse League, because I guess for the last, I guess if you're listening to this, it'll have been 4 weeks now. But for the last 3 weeks, they have officially started. I don't know about you, but I've seen, I guess, maybe mixed reactions, or opinions. I don't really want to say, I think there's one thing everybody can agree on, that the product on the field is amazing and fantastic. The games themselves have been great. I don't think you can ask for much more than almost every game going to overtime. I mean, I think there's just shows there's not a bad team in the league. They did a good job of balancing the teams. They did a good job of selecting the players. I haven't seen anybody really argue a counterpoint that the games aren't fantastic, but I have heard both sides of the fence on other aspects. But we haven't talked about it. So what have you thought so far?
Well, as I said to you earlier, I was on lacrosse fields all across the country during the time the games were on. Yeah. With thousands and thousands of their supposed target. Yeah. So off the bat, and I know this has been one of the comments, is they're missing half, if not more, of their audience. Yeah. Because you want to get them young. Get the fantasy stuff going. Do that. So I missed it. So I've only caught highlights, which have been great. I love the highlights. And then I saw on Father's Day, which was on NBC, I got to see the second half because I was at lacrosse games in the morning, and then finally got home, and then I'm like, I could catch the last half. So I got to watch that. I really do like the microphone on the field. I know some people don't, but I do. Yeah. I also know that there was swearing at one point and people clutching their pearls and going at. I'm like, you know what? Stop thinking about and then, okay, I guess this might be the Twitter part. the pearl clutching, that's great. You're showing kids the swearing and whatever, and I'm like, kids swear more than anybody. don't worry about the kids. Stop worrying about the damn kids. It's not the PLL's problem. It's not anyone. It's your parents. Okay. My kid swears, and I say stop swearing.
Yeah.
Or I say, or don't let me hear you. I know you're going to swear. I swear. I mean, so that was one thing where I'm like, Jesus, and it just seemed so contrived. It just seemed like people wanted to complain.
I could argue against that because I was one of the. Well, I guess I didn't say I wasn't clutching my pearls, but I remember because I sat in this chair on opening weekend, and I had the game on, and watching, like, I have it kind of like doing my updates and stuff like that. So I have the game on, and the first F-bomb drops, and I stopped. I was like, "Whoa!" I was like, "Did that just happen?" And then I was like, "Oh, someone forgot to hit the 5-second delay." Because it's a sporting event, so, like, you're just used to. I mean, we've all watched enough professional sporting events. There's just a certain expectation that you have, like, when it comes to that. And then, 5 minutes later, a torrent of them came out when they were in the huddle. And I sat here and I laughed, and I was like, well, I guess it wasn't a mistake. I guess it's a feature, not a glitch. Kind of thing. It's like, one of those things, like, it wasn't a mistake. It's, one of those things. But I saw a lot of people, like, with those comments. And for me, it wasn't so much because, I mean, I watch Quentin Tarantino movies, and my sister-in-law is usually aghast at how many different ways I can find to use the F word in a sentence. So, like, I am not a person who's offended at all. But I did think about it. I was like, not kids your son's age.
Right.
But I'm like, there might be a parent that's sitting there with, like, their 6-year-old being like, I'm going to introduce my son to lacrosse. I've loved this sport for so long. I'm going to sit here with my son on a Saturday afternoon. I'm going to show him some of the best players in the world. And then they have to think about that. And so for me, like, I did think about the kids as someone who doesn't have kids. But then I also thought, I'm like, at the end of the day, I'm like, this isn't what the conversation that you want to have on your opening weekend as a professional lacrosse league. Like, it's a distraction to the stuff that's happening on the field when people are talking about stuff like that. And to me, I'm like, it's not a hard problem to solve. Like, it's obviously, like, if you don't think anybody in the NFL or NHL or baseball or any of those guys are swearing in those moments, like, you're kidding yourself. They all do it. It's just called a 5-second delay. Like, it's a pretty easy problem to fix. So to me, it was like, why didn't they just do that? And I really haven't gotten to sit down and watch the games the last couple weeks, so I don't know if it's still happening.
No, but, I mean, from what I've seen, there is, but I think there's almost a carnival aspect of it, and that's the part where I get, like, they're showing it to be edgy, to be talked about. The no publicity is bad publicity. That's my feeling. Like.
But do you want that to be the impression? Like, no publicity is bad publicity,
right?
To a point.
I see both sides of it. I do. I see both sides.
I think about what happens the first time someone drops the N-word.
Well, I mean, right. See, here's my point about the thing that I don't like about any of that is there needs to be a line. And so I've always had this problem. But when it was, I don't like when there's reporters that go into locker rooms after a game, and then these are heated athletes who say what's ever on their mind because they're not calm. They're still fired up. Right. And then they get railroaded because of it. And I'm like, you shouldn't be. Those are private moments. If you were in the most heated moment, if you were at your job and at the most heated part of your job and you started swearing and someone's like, oh my God, I can't believe you said that. Like, you shouldn't be in that moment.
Yeah.
So they did this on purpose to get that reaction. So I see where you could say, well, we're giving it to you real. It's really real. Like, but, if something comes out where it's a black eye, like if you said, if the N-word came out, I mean, I don't know if it would, but
I mean, I'm not saying that it would, but I mean,
something, right.
I mean, I guess
taken
that's
into
the extreme, but I mean,
and it can offend anybody.
I mean, how many times, like, what was it, the NLL game where the announcer made a racial slur about Lyle Thompson? I mean, it doesn't have to be the N-word, but it could be something insensitive.
Something that offends somebody. And especially in this day and age, everyone's offended by something.
Yeah, well, yeah, and I'm not gonna, I mean, you can call me a snowflake if you want, like, but it's like one of those things, like, I'm not, saying like, oh, we got to desensitize everything, but I'm like, I think there's an expectation with professional sports that, there's some things I'm like, you want it to focus on the game and not all the other stuff that's around it. And I'm like, and I
think that's a valid argument.
And for me, like, that leads into a couple of the other things that I guess I've seen, because I think that was the big topic in week one that I heard like everybody kind of talking about. I don't remember. I guess it was week two. I guess there was a fight, and then in week three there was a fight. And week three, like I was up in because I went to Chicago, like I was at the Chicago event, and we'll get to the behind the scenes stuff. So like, I get cut to the chase on it. Like I am on the fence on whether I actually like the PLL at this point in time. Like I'll say that because like I am seeing stuff that I'm like it makes me like again I love the product on the field. I think the players like I know some of the players like I've talked to them. I covered some of them in high school. Like so that aspect I kind of take out of it. I am questioning the some of the promotion they're doing because I again I cover high school. When kids get in a fight on the field, they're gone.
Right.
It's none of this, oh, they're grown men, they're just having it out and whatnot. And again, I don't really care if the fight happens on the field. They're grown men, they're heated athletes, they're in that middle of, battling it out, and they're wanting to win. There's a short season. Tempers are going to flare, fists are going to fly. Don't care. I really don't give a crap about any of that stuff. Let them fight, that's fine. What bugs me is when I'm on Instagram and I see NBC promoting the fight as if it's a WWE match or a UFC fight as part of the game. That's what really bugs the shit out of me. Because I'm like, this game is great enough to stand on its own. It doesn't need to be a sideshow to all the other stuff. And I get you got a brand new league and you want to make it succeed, but at what cost? Because you keep going too far down that road, and all of a sudden, like, well, the fights get a lot of traffic. And I mean, hockey used to do it. There always used to be hockey fights. I am the guy that used to play the Sega Genesis game that you could get into a fight on the field, and we used to have a you could drop the gloves and you get into a fight. It was fun. It was a part of hockey. But hockey has done away from that because it's not. You don't want it to be the sideshow. You don't want it to be that sport. And I think having covered this game long enough, I'm like, it already has that lax bro mentality. And it gets up, you think about the Duke case years ago. You think about the Yeardley case years ago. Like, it seems like lacrosse already has this stigma. And I saw, like, Jovan Miller on Instagram. Like, he did a fantastic kind of breakdown of some of this stuff. So anybody who doesn't follow him, I would recommend kind of checking out his perspective on it as well. But it's just one of those, like, you start to kind of get into this more sideshow stuff, and it takes away from the game itself. And I don't think that the product on the field has proven like that needs to be the focus. Like if you can't sell it on the lacrosse alone, then you really just kind of don't deserve to exist. That's my opinion. Like if the product doesn't sell itself, then okay. You tried, you failed, no harm in that. You gave it a good shot, you had a good ride. Like that's really my opinion on it. And I don't think like either the PLL or MLL, one of them will fail. I don't think the sport is big enough to sustain two leagues.
Right.
One of them will collapse. And as all the faults of the MLL has, like I have seen them trying to step up to the plate with some of their broadcasts. I don't know about the players' salaries and stuff like that. I don't think they're anywhere close to matching the PLL. But I also wonder, like, all right, how much runway does the PLL have? It's a startup. How much runway do they have to pay all the guys their full salaries for this long?
They're all owners.
Yeah, like there's a time limit on this thing. Like
Absolutely.
there's a cap that this thing's got to turn a corner. They're running a business, like it's got to turn a corner at some point. And I just look at it, I'm like, if you keep getting all this other stuff in there, and I saw it, like, and I think my problem with kind of some of the conversation, feel free to at me because I'll have the conversation, but I see some of the people getting the conversation a little bit twisted. And again, it's Twitter, so I think that's what the T in Twitter stands for, is twisted. Like, people get confused with the fact that people are upset about the fights versus they think people are upset that the fights actually happen. And I will be clear, I don't care if they fight. I just don't like to see promotions like NBC promoting that aspect as part of the game, because I think the games are great enough to you don't need that. And that's not really what, and I think about, kids emulate their heroes. What's going to happen whenever, like, they don't do it in college? If it happens in high school, there's a real penalty. Like, kids are gone and they're ejected. It's not a 5-minute major sitting on the sideline. The kid's gone. He's probably missing at least another game.
Yeah, you're gone.
So, you got to think of, the PLL has a bit of a responsibility to set the standard on what it's going to be. And first 3 weeks, I'm kind of starting to wonder. I'm like, are they just willing to sell out, and whatever gets people talking about it, they just don't care.
That's what I think.
Whatever gets people talking, we just don't care.
And
Like,
I think that's what they're doing. I think that's 100% their business model.
yeah.
And I think that's I don't think what they're doing is wrong.
Do you think it's a
I
recipe
don't
for
think
success, though? Like, do you think, like, okay, we got
I
we got the fights,
well, you're
we got
saying,
this
could they
stuff.
segue back into it? Right. Can they segue back to the sport?
Well, can they?
You know what? I understand why they're doing it.
Yeah.
They've been a PR machine since day one.
Yes.
Their PR, the way they've pushed this out in the thing, they've thrown everything. Oh, even how they threw out the locations and all that. Everything's been a PR push.
Yes.
And everything in this world right now, in the world we live in right now, is
Remember
about
that thought.
right. Is about the publicity. Is about it's about the sizzle, not the steak.
Yes.
They're selling the sizzle and not the steak.
I think they have a good steak, though. That's the thing that bugs me.
Well,
they have a good steak.
And I agree. And I really agree. And I think there's much more compelling stories to put. They're also, so you've got to realize and figure out who they're going. I like to gamble. I gambled on sports all the time. I was a trader. That's what we did. Everything we did was a gamble. I mean, we'd gamble on eating a hamburger. Who could eat it faster? So they're almost going to that mentality because that's the mentality. That's the gambling person. If you get gambling on this, you'll be in business.
Right.
So they're almost going to that demographic. They're almost the barstool sports guys.
Yeah.
Which is a big demographic now. So I see what they're doing. It's a gamble. It's a gamble.
Well, I mean, to be honest, starting the league was a gamble. Just,
sure, but here's the impression that I've gotten from it over the first 4 weeks. I've enjoyed it. I enjoyed Nick Ocello punching Blaze Reardon in the face. I thought it was appropriate because what I thought was crazy was in a scramble, there was a scrum that the goalie ran up from behind and picked a guy up from behind and slammed him on his head.
Yeah.
There's where I had a problem. And if he didn't get up and do now in hockey, I was a hockey player. That would have cleared the benches. Yeah. That would have had first of all, a goalie putting their hands on somebody. Goalies usually work with the goalie. If you crack a goalie, everyone takes your head off.
Yeah.
So in a fight, no one goes after the goalie unless the goalie gets into it, and then it's goalie on goalie, bench is clear, whatever.
Yeah.
So I didn't like the body slam part, and I thought Nick Ocello was very in his right to punch him in the face when he got back up. No harm, no foul. They brushed it off. I thought both of them should have been ejected.
Yeah. I think that
I mean, it should have been a no-brainer. If you throw a punch, you're ejected.
Yeah.
If you throw someone to the ground, you're ejected.
Yes.
But the meathead in me loved it. I thought this is great.
And
but then I said
the crowd in Chicago went wild.
Right. Okay, so that's me. I'm the Chicago guy. Yeah. Now, but then as I saw the publicity of it afterwards,
yeah,
I saw Paul Rabel like mocking people who were complaining about it.
Yeah.
Like, and it came off so WWE-ish,
yep.
where I said, be careful what you go with because you're going to come off as it's fake. Now, I've always thought it already started off with a WWE feel to me with we're going to take 6 teams and bring them here and here and here. So it's like they're jobbing. It's like
Monday Night Raw.
Right. It's you're my enemy, but we know after the show you're going out and having a bite to eat. Like, is there there's no real rivalry. Like, because after the game, they're sitting in the locker rooms together. They're going out. They're traveling together. Yeah. They're not going to their homes and dealing with their fan base from their homes, like the St. Louis Blues and the Boston Bruins in the Stanley Cup.
Right.
That was real drama.
Yeah.
And I think that kind of drama only comes from a very provincial, territorial mindset. Like, you could put anybody on the St. Louis Blues, but if you have the Blues logo on that sweater, they're for you. Just like football. You know, you could love a guy who was on the Bears, but then all of a sudden he goes to Green Bay Packers and you hate his guts.
Yeah.
But you still love the Bears.
Right.
So that's always been my point about the traveling circus aspect. It's WWE-ish to me, and when I think WWE, I start thinking fake.
Yeah.
I start thinking fixed. It's enjoyable. It's a soap opera for men,
Right.
but it's not real.
Yeah.
The action is real. The physicality is real.
Yeah,
the
the
injuries are
athleticism is real.
But the outcome isn't real.
It's staged.
It's scripted.
It's a
scripted.
stage. It's a stage play.
Right. It's sports entertainment.
Yes. Which they finally admitted to years and years ago.
Well,
after
right.
fighting that, it was all fake for decades.
But my only concern is they're taking the sport, which I love, with awesome players.
Yes.
I mean, it's like a whole nother level. I mean, the physicality, the speed, the skill, it's so unbelievable. Like you said, that'll sell itself. That's the stake. The stake is damn good.
Yeah.
The second there's going to be an issue when I sit there and question a call or a goal or something like,
if there's that even hint that
every game goes to overtime.
Yeah.
I used to scoff at the NBA. Every game goes to 7 games.
Right.
All of a sudden there's no fouls in one. I used to again, the gambler, the Chicago would say that David Stern. I would say David Stern was always the Vince McMahon of the NBA.
Yeah.
And it was always NBC.
And
it was
strings.
NBC.
Yeah.
So there is my juxtaposition on this. I think the skill, holy.
Yeah. And I think I really want to make because anybody, I guess if anybody's probably already disagrees, they may have already tuned out at this point. But I think from my perspective, and what I'll say after this, like when I get my personal experience with the PLL from the other side, is for me, I feel responsibility to like criticize because they're in their first year. They can do better. As we mentioned with the Inside Lacrosse Showcase, you want every year to be better than the last year. Otherwise, that just shows you didn't learn anything.
Right.
Like, this means like, oh, it was fine. You're not learning anything if you're not constantly improving. I think that goes for anything. So for me, like, I want to see this league succeed because I think the players that play the sport deserve to be able to play it and not be like, 1920s baseball players where they got to go out and work full time in a warehouse and then go play lacrosse on the weekends.
Selling cars.
Yeah, or people expect them to perform at the high level. Like, I think, like, for any other professional sport, the players deserve, because obviously they're not just playing on a Saturday and going home. These guys are putting in the work to stay in that physical shape because as someone in 41 years old, it's not that easy to stay in that great a shape, between everything. So, it's just one of those, like, I want to see the league succeed. I really want to. Like I said, I know some of these players. I got to cover them in high school. There's some players that, my dad was a University of Maryland graduate. I bought that's another thing. Like, they're selling merch out the wazoo. Like,
that's smart.
I have won't be able to reach it here, but I bought a PLL hat and a Whip Snake shirt. So I was like, well, I'm going to do my part to support the league, and help them, help fund their endeavor. Cause that's the way, cause I got in for free because I was a media member. So I felt the need. Was like, all right, I'll pay. This is how I'll buy my ticket. So I want to see it succeed. I think I just want to see it done the right way. And I think there are things that they can do. Like, I think Paul is making a mistake if he just brushes off everybody's complaints and calls them whatever they want, or just be like, oh, people are just complaining about the fight, whatever. Because that's your audience too. Those people watch that game, and if you're just ignoring everybody, you're going to lose a portion of your audience. And I want to go back to something you said earlier. In the world we live in, that world overall is very small. Lacrosse is a very small sport when you compare it to football and baseball, even probably hockey. It is a very small, like, it is a orbiting moon of the planet. Like, it is not its own planet. And so for me, like, as someone, and this will come off however it is going to come off to everybody, but I'm relaying my experience. If anybody watched my Instagram story that I did covering the PLL, I did hold back, because my experience from the media end of that, like, I looked at it this way, like, I do a high school lacrosse website. Really, for the most part, had no real business in being at a professional game. But it was coming to Chicago. I wanted to check it out. I was like, I've done enough content over my years. I was like, I can find something to do there that will promote the game in a way that is still true to the people that follow me and listen to me. So I would say like whenever their website got up gear, I applied for the media credentials. I think I'd reached out to you and asked you if you wanted to go to see if you wanted to get credentials as well, and never heard back. So a month goes by. I think it was like 2 months went by, and then I was like, well, we're getting close, and went and did it on the website again, like 2 weeks before the game got here. Never heard back, and it said like credentials must be submitted like 3 days before. So eventually, like 2 days, 3 days, I think 3 or 4 days before the game, I was like reached out to the PLL on Twitter. I was like, hey, I haven't heard back. I was like, I just didn't want to know. I was like, I'm trying to. My wife is asking me if I want to do something on Saturday, but I've kind of blocked it off for the PLL game. I was like, I just really need to know is like if I'm approved or not, so I can tell my wife on what I'm doing. They gave me the gentleman's number, who I'm not going to name. They gave me the gentleman's email, so I reached out to him. He's like, yes, you've been approved. I'll send you an email later in the week. It's like, perfect. So, and that's when I was like, all right, what can I do content-wise? And so I reached out to people on Instagram. I was like, hey, I'm probably going to have access to some of the players. I don't know who, I don't know how often. I was like, but usually at a professional game, you have some sort of access. So I was like, what do you guys want me to ask them? Because again, as I mentioned earlier, as someone who works in the media, I realize like I have access to certain players and coaches and things like that other people don't. So I feel like if I'm able to kind of get some of those questions that people may have answered, like I feel a responsibility for me to do that for people. So, okay, I'm gonna try to hold back a little bit. But so I finally got the credentials, everything went through. So I emailed the guy. I was like, hey, I just want to be able to see like what the format is, because usually like I've been to covered college basketball games, professional football games, different, very various levels. I've done more than high school, and usually there's some sort of structure format. You get, after the game, players and coaches, like usually they ask you like, hey, who's 3 players you want? They ask the media members in the box like, hey, who's 2 or 3 players you want? They pull them off the field. They put them into a room. You've seen Bill Belichick give the non-answers. Like it's that room. The players get the interview, and it's basically the pool. So I was like, what's that like? Is that the situation? Backdrop. Yeah, with the backdrop and all that stuff, promoting the league, promoting NBC. Was told is like, oh, it's pretty informal. Just let me know who you want, and I'll try to grab them either as they come off the field or out of the locker room. I was like, all right, perfect. So it took a day, and I pulled up, like I was looking at the records for certain states and kind of looking at players, like who would I want, like who, kind of had some ideas on some content that I'd like to do. And so I gave him a list. I was like, I'm not going to get everybody. I'm sending you 15 players over the course of 2 games. I don't expect everybody, but I don't know who you can get. So I'm just going to give you the list, because if you get me 2, this gives you enough people to pull from that to be sure you can find a couple. Got the response back, be like, oh, it'd really be better if you just gave it to me on the day of, like rather than in advance. I was like, okay, no problem. I was like, I get it. I was like, maybe they want to wait and see who performs in the game. I was like, kind of thinking, all this different thing. So we get to game day, and I'm kind of sitting around I went on the sidelines, took pictures and all that stuff. It gets to the 4th quarter, and I'm like, never seen the guy at all, which is very odd, because the guy that usually handles the media is usually somewhere with the media, and it was me, and there was only a couple people. I mean, that was one thing I was looking for, was kind of keen on, is the Tribune or Sun-Times going to be there? And again, I'm going to come back to that in the world we live in at comment. This all will come back around. So like we go through that, like I asked one of the girls there, like Paul was in the booth, and I thought about asking him if he wanted to talk, but I kind of realized like I didn't want to be that guy. Like I've met Paul before, but I'm like, he's busy. He's doing so many other things. Like I was like, if I'm going to ask him, I'm going to go through the proper channels basically. So I asked one of the girls that were up in the booth, I was like, hey, if you get a chance to reach the guy. She's like, yeah, she's like, where are you? She's like, I'll call him right now. She's like, where are you sitting? And I was like, I'm down at the end of the box. She's like, okay, just wait there. 4th quarter came and went. Never saw the guy. Overtime came and went. Never saw the guy. So at the 4th overtime, I walked down, and I was like, yeah, did you ever get a hold of him? She's like, no. She's like, but he said he'd be down in the tour office. Okay. I was like, in back of my mind, I'm like, but you just said you never talked to him. But you just said he would be in the tour. It's like that moment. I was like, all right, I get. You're like, she just knows. So I go down to the tour office, and I'm like, ask for the guy, and basically get told he was walking out as I was walking in, and he was like, oh yeah, hey, how you doing? He's like, I'm gonna drop this off in the locker room. He's like, when I come back, we'll discuss. Right then and there, that's not a good thing. I was like, all right, what? I'm like, in the back of my mind, I was like, all right, really, what is there to discuss? I was like, I gave you a list of players. Like, I had the list. You told me to give it to you on game day. Like, I'm kind of thinking in the back of my mind, I was like, I'm going to have wasted my day. Keep in mind, it had started pouring down rain. I was drenched by the start of the second game. And I'm like, at this point, like, all I have is a bunch of photos, which is fine. It was fun, but I'm like, I really don't have anything to do with them either. It's just kind of like, there'll be a nice memory. Or maybe not a nice memory. But so guy comes back. He basically tells me, he's like, everybody went home. I went, what? I was like, well, that's funny because we're in Chicago. Most of them probably don't live here. I think it's odd. He was like, yeah, he's like, everybody's like, most of the times they shower after the game. He's like, but everybody just left. I'm like, okay. He's like, I can set up phone interviews later in the week. Keep in mind, we're recording this on Thursday. Haven't heard anything. He told me Monday through Thursday. So yeah, so I walked away with nobody, like no access, nothing. And I kept thinking in the back of my head, I was like, all right, this is weird. I was like, I've never been to a professional sporting event, and I kind of tie college athletics into that too because I've been to several like ACC games, which is basically professional basketball.
Right.
Especially a professional basketball. If you grew up where I grew up in Raleigh, it is professional basketball. But I was like, that's really odd that you have a sport that you're trying to promote and you're not giving any access to any of the coaches, any of the players. I was like, I just found it very odd. And I called a couple of my buddies who've covered sports a lot longer than I have, and they were like, they have never been to a professional game in which they've been denied access to players or coaches or anything to file a story. Because most of these guys, like, they're filing a story. They need a quote or something like that. So I was just kind of like I was a little disappointed. And a part of me was like, am I just that, privileged dude that just expects something that he shouldn't have expected to begin with? I was like, I run a small website. I was like, maybe they didn't give two flying F's that, I was there. I was like, which is entirely possible. But then again, just tell me that. Like, you're just not at a level we're going to make access. I couldn't live with that. But the way it was treated, I kept thinking, I was like, that was pretty messed up. Like, in my opinion, I thought it was messed up. And then I started looking because there was a guy that was covering for U.S. Lacrosse there. He didn't have an original quote in his story. He quoted the stuff that was off NBC and off YouTube. So it got me thinking. You don't have the Tribune. You don't have the Sun-Times. You're not giving access to apparently any of the media members that were there. How do you expect to promote this sport outside of our little world? If you need to grow this sport, and you're already turning off the people that, not turning off, you're already not reaching the people that are already at lacrosse tournaments all summer because that's when your games are going on. And you're not pulling in any new media members because the Tribune and Sun-Times, like, really in my opinion, like, they should have made an effort to have someone there. Sure. Offer to write it up themselves just to appear in one of those newspapers to show, because there was, they had a pretty good turnout. But again, I keep thinking, I was like, if you need this to grow, if you need this to get to the level that, I don't even know, like, considering the size of the MLS stadium they were in, I assume Chicago Fire does pretty well attendance-wise. They didn't fill that.
Right. So they're moving back, I think.
Yeah.
They're moving to another place.
I hear they want to get into Chicago.
Yeah.
Actually in Chicago. Anybody who doesn't know, like, where the Chicago Fire is played, it's in Bridgeview. It's
very far away.
Yeah,
Bridgeview.
It's on the southern south suburbs. Yeah, it's not Chicago.
If I was in Chicago, I wouldn't have gone.
Yeah,
I'm not going all the way.
It's not Chicago. It took me an hour and a half to get home. It was pouring down rain. It was bad. It's Chicago traffic. It takes you an hour and a half to get anywhere in Chicago traffic.
Right.
But at any rate, so like I just kept thinking, I was like, you expect the sport to grow beyond what it is, and yet like you can't fill an MLS stadium, but yet you're not bringing in media members to promote the sport outside. And I know they are a media machine. They have RJ Kaminsky on YouTube, and they do all the YouTube stuff. They have NBC behind them. But I keep thinking, I was like, at some point, you're going to need more than that. Because that's reaching the world that you already have. You already have this group of fans. And yes, I'm doing on an audio podcast, I'm making a hand gesture. I was like, you already have like your certain group of fans. And how do you expect it to grow beyond that if you don't do anything? And like part of that is like, it's for the players. I get that. But also is like, you need to be able to promote those players. Like NFL promotes its players. NBA basically rises and falls on its players. Well, I say nobody cares about the teams, but when Michael Jordan retired, the only question I heard for about 7 years is who's the next Michael Jordan. Didn't matter that teams are still winning championships without him. It was who was the next Michael Jordan? Who is that next star that they're going to hang the league on and promote? Most leagues are Peyton Manning was doing Papa John's commercials and Geico commercials long before people promote the athletes in their sport because there's
Tom Brady. That's all I gotta say is Tom Brady.
People relate to the players. But if you're not giving access to the players, like how do you expect that to be a part of the league you promote? You're promoting the game, yes, but you need to promote the players because people need to attach themselves to a player. And yes, we already have certain attachments to players because we've seen them over the years. We know these players, but I just keep wondering, like, how are you going to branch out beyond what you already have if that's kind of the way it's run? And again, go back, on the field product is perfect. I think there's other things they can do better. That's why I'm giving my story, and I'm sure there's people that'll just call me whatever and say whatever. It's like, and I readily admit, I run a high school site. Maybe they didn't give two shits. It's fine. Don't care. But I think the treatment that I received was not what it could have been. Like, that's just flat out for me. I'm like, you could have just told me. You couldn't have just given me the runaround. Like, just be honest. Be like, hey, dude, we're not going to give you an access to a player. Don't give me the runaround and blow smoke up my ass about this stuff. Like, that's honestly my opinion. So I think with all that, and I kept thinking about it, I was like, obviously on my 7-hour drive to Minnesota and back, I kept thinking about it, I was like, I thought about, the language, the fights, the promotion of the fights, the way, my personal experience with the league. And I just kind of keep thinking, I'm like, all right, what do we have? Like, I was like, and that's kind of why I say, I was like, I'm not really sure how I really feel about the league at this point. Like, I'm kind of on the fence. And for someone who was pretty much all in on week 1, and I've bought the ticket, like, they've had my $40 or whatever it was. And so, like, I felt like I was like, I'm all in, and I feel like I'm kind of edging my way out of the ship at this point. I'm just like, go back to watching college. It's a lot more fun. I enjoy it. Like that's kind of where I'm kind of edging myself towards at this point. And I'm honestly not really sure how I even feel about that. I'm kind of like, because I want to see the league succeed. I'm like, I really want it. It's just kind of like over, like this, we're talking like this is 3 weeks in. There is a long time to change my mind. But that's kind of where I'm at. I don't know what you think about all that, because obviously I did not share that story intentionally because I wanted your honest reaction.
Right.
You can tell me I'm full of crap, and then be like, oh,
no,
get
no,
over
no, no,
yourself.
no.
Like,
first of all, I don't. I think you saying that you're with a high school publication and that could be is wrong. Is
well,
totally
I look
wrong.
at it from like from a professional league, like, oh wow, we got a high school guy here.
Doesn't matter. I walk up to full-time, big-time people and say, I'm with Lax Records. I don't care. I'm literally professional athletes.
Yeah.
I've in other sports when I'm in places where there are pros. I've been with people who run the NCAA, which I've told you about that when I basically cornered a guy for 45 minutes and just tortured him.
Yeah.
I don't care. First of all, our site is a lot bigger than people think.
Yeah.
Hey, let's say we got 75,000 people who read our stuff. That's 75,000 more than we're at that game.
Yeah.
Okay?
Yeah.
I can tell you another thing. You know who talks to me constantly, sends me emails, sends me calls all the time? Parents. You know what parents do? Pay.
Yeah.
Okay? You shape opinion.
Yeah.
Okay? They should always be good to them. Now,
well, I think they should be. Yeah, they should be. I mean, really, they're a media entity, and they need to really treat everybody.
Okay, but now I'll go with the other part. They're a new company for a new age, for a new time, for a new demographic, for a new whatever, and maybe they don't want the reporters anymore.
And I think, I thought about that.
Because if you look at now what reporters do, they don't report anymore. They opine. And it's usually snarky, and it's usually shitty, and you sort of want to punch him in the face. Honest to God. I grew up with Jay Mariotti. I hated his guts. I just wanted to hear about the story. I didn't want to hear what he thought. There was always this and this and this and this. So I can see maybe they're at that point saying, we don't need 50, 60 journalists asking the same damn question over and over again. And then if they get uptight, say, get like Hall of Fame balloting. Like, people aren't making the Hall of Fame because journalists didn't like them. So that's coming from a guy who looks at it that way. I can see where that might be their thinking as a new age kind of entity. But you do need your fans. You can't I've always had a problem with their phrase, "we the player."
Yeah.
And remember I wrote an article that said it should be for the fans.
Yes.
Well, now I've seen them put that on somewhere.
Yeah.
Now, I would like to see when that went out and when my article went out, because I know this. I sent that to them.
Yeah.
I sent it to Paul Rabel on Twitter, and I said it flat out.
Yeah.
You might want to be for the fans, not the players, because there's not going to be 50,000 players sitting in the stadium watching the players. Right. It's going to be what they want, 50,000 fans. So you don't concentrate on players because the players aren't getting anything if there's no fans.
Yeah.
It's about drive fans, treat fans, whatever. You might be the liaison to the young up-and-coming fans and to the parents who pay for those fans.
Yeah.
So as far as the respect for what you do, don't ever sell yourself short about that. They should be respecting you because you're the future of the game.
Well, I think
there's not a doubt.
And
I
think
you're at their lowest level.
And I think I just try to
grassroots.
I try to think like as far as what I do, like I love what I do, and I wouldn't change it. So it's like one of those things. Like I was trying to think, and I thought about that. New league for a new age. I was like, maybe they don't. Knowing Bill Belichick probably has a hand in shaping this league in some way, shape, or form, because it's no secret that Paul Rabel and Bill Belichick, they're good friends.
Yes, right.
So I was like, and obviously anybody who's listening to this probably knows how Bill Belichick is with the media and press conferences. Like maybe they just decided like we're not going to do that. We're going to promote ourselves. Like they want to shape the message and they want to be able to have control over the message that goes out, how it goes out, when it goes out, who is sending that message player wise. I totally agree with that. If that's the way you want to do it, fantastic.
That's what I think they're doing.
Just be honest about it.
Right.
And when you're a media member, be like, you will not have access to players or coaches. Like
right.
If you
but here's why they don't want to do that.
Just flat up, like just say it. Like that's all you have to do.
Okay, so then now let's look at you know the Chicago media. I know the Chicago media. If you had all John Mullins and the writers, and they said, and a new entity came out and said, we don't want to have you guys involved with our thing. We're fine with our message. And they came out and told you straight honestly, what would be the next article you wrote? Screw them. It would be a bloodbath. They'd go after them. So I don't know if this is what they're doing, if they're going to do it this way. Again, it's very early. I'm giving them the benefit of the doubt on this. And I will say this, being new in this thing where you've done this for a while, and I've now dealt with high school associations, and I've had one good one and one bad one, and I've dealt with some different coaches from different things, and I've seen the difference. And again, I'm a bull. I'll kick down a door, and I don't give a shit who I say something to. I never have, never will. So my reaction and your reaction probably would have been two different things at this thing. But at the same point, I don't consider myself a true reporter.
Right.
Like when I was at the when I was at the Brother Rice championship game, I talked to Coach Shala for 45 minutes before the game.
Yeah.
And Coach Wilson. Just shooting the shit. Like literally. Like, oh, what do you think? And blah, 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 talking. Just like nothing.
Yeah.
After the game, when all the pool of reporters went crowding around him and went like this, I walked by, just gave a little salute and walked away.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking, am I supposed to be I said, I don't want to interview him. I know my story. I know what I want to write about. I want to write about the game. I don't care what he said. I don't care what he's doing. So I don't have the actual journalistic integrity or knowledge. I said, here's what I want to write about, the game. I could have talked, some of the players came to me before the game like, oh, I hope I could talk to you after the game.
Yeah.
They've known me from all season, that I was there all season.
Yeah.
Some of them one kid said, I hope I get your award after the game.
Yeah.
I won't say who it is. My son was amazed that the kid came up to me during the thing. So I'm a different animal, but I see how my feeling from the beginning of this whole league has been, we're going to do everything absolutely different than every pro league. We're not going to go from the city. We're going to do it as a traveling team. We're going to wear different kind of uniforms. I mean, their uniforms are completely different than anything that's ever been shown in lacrosse.
Yeah.
They changed the field dimensions. They changed the timing. They changed
face off. Yeah.
They changed everything. So this is just another thing. Now, he's either going to be a genius and change the literal world of sports. Possible. Or he's going to get smacked to reality and compromise back to something. Or It's going to be a mixture of both, where he says, where there, at some point the MLL and the PLL, it will all be folded into one. I don't know if it'll be called the PLL or the MLL, but there's too many pro lacrosse players out there that you have to have. You don't have Rob Pennell, and you don't have Lyle Thompson.
Right.
Sorry.
Yeah. I mean, there'll be there will be a winner and a loser, possibly. Right. I mean, right. I guess if they form, you could argue, but like, oh, they both win because they, the whole become
the MLL lost. The MLL's lost.
Yeah.
No matter what, they lost because they haven't done it in 12 years, and now if this makes them get off their ass to do something, then they lost. They're behind the 8 ball. I don't know if this will work. I think this might be the great way to launch this for 2 years or something and then segue into something. So I don't know.
Yeah.
So I could understand you being upset about it. I think you're right to be upset about it. I think you were disrespected. No one likes to be disrespected.
Yeah.
And no one likes to be disrespected when you were there to try to appreciate their product. You were going there to sell their product. That's
yes,
in
that was
essence,
the goal.
Reporters are salesmen for the product they cover.
Yeah.
To the people they want. Now, I think that's gotten away where they've almost become jaded towards it, but that's a whole nother issue. But you were disrespected and you're rightly upset. And I'm upset about it because of it, because it reflects on me too. I take personal offense at something you. It bugs me. So I think you're right about that. Do I think there's growing pains? Sure. Do I think this will be the norm? I don't think so. I don't think it's a smart business model. But you never know. Like I said, there's a new entity, the new type of, you got Deadspin, you got Barstool.
Yeah.
And he was on Barstool.
Bleacher
he was
Report.
on Barstool.
Yeah.
Right. He was on Barstool. He was doing, joking around. I mean, he's going to alternative media.
Yeah.
Which is big media. Like Barstool is a pretty big thing.
Yeah,
I
it's big.
I don't follow it. It's not my thing all the time. I get a kick out of it when they talk about the gambling. Because the one guy, I think he's Barstool Big Cat. I think he's in Chicago. And I think the one thing that I saw on something that drew me to it was he said, "Kill your bookie." And I cracked up about it because, that's what everyone's saying. I'm going to kill my bookie this weekend. And then he openly talks about gambling. And then he had Paul Rabel on.
Yeah.
So that's when I said, this is a whole different take. And it's a younger generation. It's a younger demographic. It's a different world.
And I mean, they provide access to the players via their YouTube and stuff like that. Right. And to be perfectly honest, like the players have their own platform. And vlogging is its own separate thing on YouTube. And I do get all that. I truly do. But it was one of those things I'm like, you go as a reporter, you cover. And for any of the people there, and there was a couple people there that was media members that were literally just there to hang out. They weren't writing anything. They weren't doing there was a couple people that were media that were just there hanging out. And they were taking pictures or maybe something like that. But I got, talking to a couple of them. They were just really there. They're like, oh, it came to Chicago. I wanted to check it out. And they had the ability to get a media pass and they took it. But they were just there catching the vibe. But then there's other people that were there to work. And there's just, when you do this long enough, you have an expectation. It's just like, all right, I'll get a couple quotes. And most of the time it's maybe nothing quotes. But for a lot of people, it's just like, that's part of the access ability. It's like, write the story, but you may have seen something in the game that some other people didn't like. I want to ask you about this one play because that's the point that I think the game turned on. And then you get a player to talk about that. And that's something that your story has that makes it unique and provides insight to the game that someone else at home may not have thought about.
Sure.
There's that part of it as well.
Sure.
So, I just think I truly hope, that it's growing pains. I honestly can't say if I will request another media pass. It's just one of those things because I don't, to be perfectly honest, I don't want to waste my day. I could have spent the day with my wife. It was a crappy day. I could have spent it with my wife and had more fun, to be honest with you. So it was one of those things, but I went because I was like, one, it was a novelty. I was like, well, like I told Michelle, they may never come around again. This could be the XFL. One and done. It could be completely bomb, which, based on what I see, I don't think so. I have to assume that they've got 3 years. I don't know why I picked 3 years, but I figure they got 3 years to make an impact out like and turn a profit. It's a business. It's got to turn a profit. It's got to start making money. Like you
Yeah,
can't,
I don't even know if I give it 3 years, and I'll tell you why. Because the people who are involved in it are money people. They have private equity dollars.
I guess it
and
depends
private equity doesn't wait.
Yeah, I guess it depends. I mean, one of the things that I found, throw this out there too, like I mentioned earlier, they're selling a lot of merchandise. I bought some.
Well, that's huge.
Like they're
That's
selling,
huge.
like
That's
which
big.
is a massive thing because that's promotion. Like people are wearing it, be like, oh, what's that? And because they're unique, no one else has that Whipsnake shirt, like a logo. Like everybody, be like, what is that? What is that? The PLL hat. It's got the branding. I will try to find it. So for anybody who's sitting here, you can see it. Gorgeous hat. Absolutely gorgeous hat. Got their logo. It's a nice hat. I mean, it's got even got the PLL here on the side. And yes, it's an audio podcast. So if you want to see it, you have to
that is pretty cool.
Go to the YouTube channel. Very nice hat. More times than not, I was standing behind. They didn't have enough volunteers, so there was long lines that took a long time to get through. It was raining. It was, like I said, horrible weather. And a lot of times, like, we don't have this size. People would ask for a large. Like, oh, we don't have a large. We have medium. We have extra large. The hat I had to go to 2 different places to find because they were sold out everywhere else. And then at all those places, they were like, oh, we don't have that size, but you can order it online.
Well, that's the easiest thing.
And I'm like, yeah, I get that. I was like, but you have people here willing to give you money. Like, how do you run out? Like, and we're not talking about 15,000 people. Yeah, my cat is like, oh, my cat's like, you're going on a little bit long.
For a second.
So yeah, it's just one of those things like, maybe that's the cute cat's like, all right, you're done. But it's one of those things I took. I'm like, I think again, growing pains first year, but we'll see. Like, there's also some things like I think there's some very experienced people behind it that I think there's some faux pas that could have been avoided. And for most part, like with the promotion of the fighting, like I think more brushing people off because no one wants to feel like their opinion is not heard or their opinion is discounted or it's not valuable. And it's one thing to say like, oh, it's part of the game. Like, I don't even really know what the other aspect of that would be, but to completely brush people off and make their opinion feel like it's not valid, because you will never convince someone. I think most of our politics will prove you will never convince someone their opinion about something is wrong. Like, it's an opinion. It's not a fact. It's an opinion. Like, I think this. If you tell me, like, I think the sky is blue, and you're like, you're wrong, it's purple. Like, you're never going to convince someone that. So trying to convince someone that something that they feel is not right, that they're wrong for feeling that way, like, that is not a good model. You will lose people. You can hope you will make those people up, but I think everybody who runs a business knows it's a lot cheaper to keep a customer than it is to get a new one. So
you're very true.
There's always that to think of it, and it's not going to be that much difference. Like if you turn enough people off and people spread the word and be like, oh, I want that, because you need people to buy that subscription. Because if you're running it during the season when lacrosse games are going on and lacrosse club recruiting events, kids aren't going to stop wanting to get recruited because they want to go to the PLL game. They're not going to want to tell a college coach like, oh, I'm not going to be there this weekend because I want to see Whipsnakes play. College coach is like, so do I, but I'm here.
Right.
Where are you? So that's not going to stop. So I think there's some things they probably need to iron out overall from my experience. But, and I think we come from like, I want to see it succeed. I think, I like the idea of professionals getting paid for what they do. I think that's just kind of a good thing to go about. But we'll see. Maybe we sit in here in a year and we'll be like, you know what? They were on the cutting edge. They knew what they were doing before anybody else knew what they were doing. It is the biggest thing. Maybe it overtakes all these other sports we were talking about, hockey and MLS. But, so hopefully I'm wrong. But I guess we'll kind of see where it goes from here. I got nothing else. That's my rant for the week, I guess. But it'll be interesting to see what we got. So, yeah, I don't really have any. Like, next week, I'm going to the Under Armour games. So my last week of travel for basically the lacrosse season. I guess I'll do a minute here to promote stuff coming up on Lax Records. I do currently have the list of the Century Club members from 2019 and 2020 on the site. So if you're not on that page already, please email me so I can get players added. But then after the Under Armour games, I'll have the All Lax Records and my Player of the Year. So we'll be doing all that. So even though the season's over, and I know for some people their season has been over, I think Florida, their season's been over for a long time, but Massachusetts plays their championship this weekend. So I have to.
Right, it's today.
Oh yeah, it was today. It was Thursday.
Yes, because they asked me to go to it, and I almost went, but I'm like, I can't make that 14-hour drive
Yeah,
home.
that's a long
That was
drive.
that was the final straw. Like I told my wife, and I said I might go see Hingham, Lincoln Sudbury. Uh, I have a friend whose son plays for Hingham.
Yeah,
If you've ever seen my thing where I've adopted Hingham as my
yeah,
East Coast team.
yes,
A friend of mine's son plays for them. So and their Twitter is unbelievable.
yes. They have fantastic Twitter. Whoever runs it is phenomenal.
He's great. It's great. It's
Yeah.
like one of those awesome. Like I love how he does the game. So, but that was it. So yes, you're right. It's pretty much over for high school, but the summer is just getting warmed up. I think
Yeah.
the big NLF is this weekend.
Yeah. And so that's why I have to wait until, I like to wait until, like, it would be very wrong of me to release a National Player of the Year and an All Axe Records team when states are still playing their season. Or say, like, oh, this is the year-ending recap when the state's still playing. So I always wait until the last state, and then it always takes a few weeks for career numbers to get tallied and all that stuff. So, like, I usually wait a few weeks. So it'll be a little bit later this year than normally is, but it'll be sometime in July when all that gets released. And then, but, yeah, this coming weekend is my last travel weekend of lacrosse, I think, for the summer so far. Like, I have some other reporters covering some stuff this summer for me, but, I'll be honest. It'll be nice for a little bit of a break and in the usual routine, as I'm sure you can attest to, because I saw how many miles you put on your truck when you posted on Twitter. Anybody who hasn't seen it, check out Mike's Twitter account, which is a perfect segue to tell them where they can find that Twitter account.
You can find me on Twitter at MFWCHI. I'm usually posting about what I'm doing. You can email me at mward@laxrecords.com. And please email. I mean, I can't tell you a lot of the emails I get, and I answer. And I'll answer you on Twitter. I'm not shy. So please find me there.
And you can find me at Lax Records, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. It's youtube.com/Lax Records for the people who are listening to the audio podcast. If you want to see what the PLL hat looks like, you just have to go to YouTube and check that out. Sorry for bringing a visual medium into an audio podcast, but you just can't help when you're staring at the other person, you feel the need to justify it. So everybody, have a week.
Have a good time.
Thank you so much for watching this week's video. We really cannot thank you enough for doing it. If you have not already, please don't forget to hit that subscribe button. If you enjoyed this week's video, please give us a thumbs up. It really does help out the show. And of course, if you really enjoyed this week's video, you can check out any of our other previous videos by clicking the link up there.